Erev Tov and good evening, everyone. We are in the Zera Shimshon on Parsha Vayetzei, and we're in Os Yud Aleph, that's section 11 in the sefer. It's Daf Shin Gimel. We're going to take a look at one pasuk, which the Zera Shimshon is going to start off with, and then we'll jump right in. So this is Parsha Vayetzei, Perek Chav Tes Pasuk Yud Beis. It says, this pasuk takes place right after Yaakov Avinu arrives in Haran, and he's talking to some shepherds at a well, and Rachel comes up with her father's flock. So, Vayage Yaakov l'Rachel, Yaakov told Rachel, Ki achi avihahu, that he was a brother of her father, V'chi ben Rivkahu, and that he was the son of Rivka, who was her father's sister, in other words, Rachel's aunt. Vataratz vataged la'aviha, and Rachel ran and told her father. So the Zera Shimshon is going to start with a Gemara, which is bothered by the fact that Yaakov said, Ki achi avihahu, that the pasuk tells us Yaakov told Rachel, I'm a brother of your father, when actually that was superfluous and inaccurate, because the next phrase is Yaakov says, I'm the son of Rivka, and that's really where the relationship comes from. That's how he was related. Yaakov had no particular, he was not a relative of Lavan's directly, and also he certainly wasn't the brother of Lavan. So the Gemara that we're going to look at now, that the Zera Shimshon is going to start with, wants to know, what did Yaakov mean by saying that he was the brother of Lavan? So let's take a look at that. Section Yud Aleph. Gemara, Baba Basra Perek Ches. The Gemara and Baba Basra in the 8th Perek brings down the pasuk that we just read. Vayage Yaakov l'Rachel, and Yaakov told Rachel, v'chule, etc. Amra le. So the Gemara says, what was going on in this conversation? So here's the behind the scenes story. And this will help us understand why Yaakov said that he was a brother of Lavan's. That's the whole issue the Gemara is dealing with at this point. Amra le, Rachel said to Yaakov, v'chule, Isli Abba Ramoi, I have a father who is a deceiver. Amar lo, Yaakov said to Rachel, Umay rimuse, what is his deception? What is this plan, this deceitful plan that he is hoping to pull off? Amrale, Rachel said back to Yaakov, Isli Isisa, I have a sister, the Kashisha Minoi, who is older than I am. Velo minsiv li mikama, and he will not marry me off before her. So according to this Gemara and Baba Basra, from the very beginning when Yaakov first met Rachel, Rachel was totally transparent and open with him and warned him and said, listen, you want to marry me and I want to marry you, but my father will never let it happen because I have an older sister, which is of course Leah, who was of course Leah. And my father will never let me get married before her, and therefore he's going to trick you. So know up front that he's going to deceive you for that purpose, to prevent you marrying me before Leah. Amar lo, Yaakov said back to Rachel, Achiv ano biramos, I am his brother in deceit, in deception. So what did Yaakov mean according to the Gemara when he said, I am the brother of your father, I'm Lavan's brother? He meant to say, of course, I'm not actually his brother, not literally his brother, but I'm his brother in deception. So don't worry, the same way he knows how to trick people and deceive people, I know how to trick people and deceive people, and we will be able to work this out. Amrale, Rachel said to Yaakov, Umishari litzadiki lisiguye biramaos. And who says it's permissible for righteous people to practice deception? So that's a very important question. Rachel said, I understand my father, who's a Russia, he practices lies and deception. He's a corrupt person. There's no big questions to ask about that, nothing hard to understand. But now you, Yaakov Avinu, you the tzaddik, you are telling me that you are his equal in deception? How can you practice deception at all? How can you trick or lie to anyone? You're a tzaddik. So Yaakov answers, yes. And he quotes a pasuk from Shmuel Beis. This is David HaMelech talking. Im novar titavar, with the pure you are pure. Ve'im ikesh titapol, and with the corrupt you are crafty. Now we need to take pause for a moment to understand this pasuk and why Yaakov quoted it. But first, please note that you might have seen it already, that there are two typos there. In the text, it said there's an extra resh in the word titavar. It should just be one resh. And then at the end of the pasuk, it should just say titapal. So there's an extra tough. The last tough in that word, titapal, shouldn't be there. So please, you can correct those. Okay, so the pasuk is David HaMelech talking about Hashem. And David HaMelech says to Hashem, with the pure of heart, with the sincere, with the honest, you are pure, you are honest. And with the corrupt, with the deceivers and the liars, you are crafty. You trick them, just like they trick and deceive people, you trick them. So this is Yaakov Avinu. By quoting this pasuk, Yaakov Avinu is saying to Rachel, you're asking me, how can a righteous person practice deceit? It's from Hashem. Hashem teaches this, and he bases it on the pasuk in Shmuel Beis. Hashem, with those who are crafty and deceitful, then it's permissible for me, Yaakov says, also to be crafty and deceitful, just like Hashem is crafty with the corrupt and deceitful. So what did Yaakov do? There was a practical issue here. Rachel is saying, Lavan is going to trick you and not let you marry me. He's going to trick you somehow into marrying Leah. So what's Yaakov going to do? Mosar lo simanim. So Yaakov gave Rachel special secret signs, v'chule, etc., in order that there's no way that he could ever be tricked. At least that was the plan. He can't be tricked because if Lavan tries to switch Leah for Rachel, Yaakov can just say, okay, tell me the special signs that I gave you. And if the person, the woman who he's with, doesn't know the signs, that proves that she's not Rachel, she must be Leah, and boom, Lavan's whole deceitful plan would fail. So that's what was going on in behind the scenes in the conversation between Yaakov when he first met Rachel. Ad kan Lashono, until here is a quote from the Gemara in Baba Basra, and that Gemara is extremely important for us because it tells us what's going on between Yaakov and Rachel. But the pasuk of im navar ti tavar, with the pure you will be pure, v'imi kesh ti tapal, and with the corrupt you will be crafty. That's very central. That pasuk is central to everything the Zera Shimshon is going to discuss as we move forward. So let's go to the next paragraph. Yesh l'daktek, we need to analyze ma hayasa kavanas Rachel. What did Rachel have in mind? Shahayasa soveris, that she thought the lo shari litzadiki v'chule, that it's not permissible for righteous people to practice deceit, even in relation to her father who's trying to trick them, even in relationship to someone who's trying to trick them. Why did she think that? The Zera Shimshon says, V'ha imi keshti tapal krahu. There's a pasuk that says that with the corrupt, Hashem is crafty. If Hashem can be crafty with the corrupt, certainly tzaddikim and Yaakov Avinu in particular should be able to be crafty. So how could it be that Rachel had this svara that she had to go against the pasuk, as the Zera Shimshon says, v'svarahi, and it's a svara that she's bringing. She's bringing a svara, a logical thought, to go against the pasuk, and we know that would never work. When we have a pasuk, you can't say, oh, but I think such and such. I think X makes sense or Y makes sense. Well, it's wonderful that you think that, but here's a pasuk that rejects your svara, that goes against and disproves your logical, what you think is logical reasoning. So that's the Zera Shimshon's question. Continuing at the top of the second column. Umahe Shiva Yaakov. And we also need to understand, once we're able to understand what Rachel really thought and what was behind, who motivated her to ask her question, about tzaddikim and how Yaakov could practice deceit, then Mahi Shiva Yaakov, then what exactly was Yaakov's answer to her? And we also have another statement in the Medrash Rabbah that's important to understand. Al pasuk Vayetzei Lavan, on the pasuk about Lavan gathering all of the townspeople and the neighbors together, v'chule, etc. Vayas mishteh, and he made a party. This pasuk is referring to the wedding of Leah with Yaakov. Of course, Yaakov thought he was marrying Rachel. That's the whole deception that we're focusing on. But that's what it's talking about. Lavan says that he invites everybody to come to a big party. Yaakov assumes he is going to marry Rachel at this wedding, and that's what everyone is celebrating. Kol hahilelia, all that night, havitzavach lo, Yaakov called out to this woman who he was marrying, Rachel, vihi anyale, and she answered him. So he, according to the Medrash, Yaakov was concerned, as we said, about Lavan trying to trick him. So he kept saying, Rachel, Rachel, and Leah kept answering, yes, I'm Rachel. The tzafra in the morning, vihine Leah. In the morning, it turned out to be Leah. So Yaakov was truly tricked and fooled by Lavan, even though he knew he should have known what was coming, and he did know what was coming. He was still deceived. Amar Lo, so Yaakov said to Leah, Rimi asa bas Rimah, you are a deceitful person, the daughter of a deceitful person. That's a harsh criticism that Yaakov said to Leah. Lav belelia karina Rachel ve'at anisli. Didn't I keep calling out to you saying Rachel, and you answered me as if you were Rachel? You deceived me instead of saying no, instead of being silent, or instead of saying no, it's Leah. You deceived me. You brazenly tricked me. Amrele, Leah said to Yaakov, Is sapar de leisle talmidim? Is there ever a barber who doesn't have students? Meaning, if a person has a certain skill and it's a skill that others want, like a barber skill, and others want to learn that, then every time a barber shows up, people are going to want to be his students and learn from him how to be a barber, how to cut people's hair. Lo kachavitzavich lo avuch. Did not your father call out to you Esav and use the name Esav because he was expecting Esav to come back with the food and get his bracha? Ve'at anisle, and you answered as if you were Esav. Ad kan lishono, until here is a quote from the Medrash. What that means is Leah said back to Yaakov, I learned from you, just like the students learned from the barber. I learned from you. You deceived your father. When you came in the room, he said, Esav. He said, are you Esav? And you answered, yes, that you're Esav, the firstborn. And so just like you did that and you tricked your father, I learned from you and I tricked you. So the Zera Shimshon says, Koshe, this is difficult. Al Leah, this is different. We have a problem, a question on Leah. V'chi bishvil she Yaakov rima le'aviv. Is it true that just because Yaakov deceived his father, hutar lo lirimoso, it became permissible for her, Leah, to trick Yaakov? In other words, what kind of point is that? Two wrongs don't make a right, as the saying goes. Just because Yaakov misled his father, according to what Leah is saying, did that give her the permission to deceive him? The answer is no, it shouldn't have given her permission to deceive him. So we have that question as well. So to pause here for a moment, the Zera Shimshon wants us to understand the dialogue between Yaakov and Leah that the Gemara in Baba Basra, that he opened with quoting the Gemara in Baba Basra, meaning what was Rachel thinking when she said, Yaakov, you're a tzaddik, how can you practice deceit? What was her thought process with that? And what did Yaakov's response mean to her when he quoted the pasuk based on our future understanding coming up of what she was really asking? And also, what did Leah mean in the dialogue brought down in the Medrash Rabbah when she said to Yaakov, I tricked you because you tricked your father? How is that a justification? So the Zera Shimshon begins to answer. V'yesh lomar, and we can say, de amrina bebrachos perakama. we say in the first parak of Maseches Brachos, Rav Huna havale arba mea dani dechamra. Rav Huna had 400 barrels of wine, iskif, and they became sour. V'chule. So the Gemara there tells that the Rabbanan came up to visit Rav Huna, who was obviously shocked and deeply saddened that he had this tremendous financial loss. So they came to visit him. And they said to him, you need to think about your actions. And so he said, is anyone aware of something I might have done wrong that would justify the onish, the punishment of this tremendous financial loss of 400 barrels of wine going bad? So now the Gemara continues. Amruleh, so they said to him, Hachi shemialan, this is what we heard. Dilo yohev mar shibosha le'arise. The master, meaning Rav Huna, we heard, is not giving the vines, the grapevines, at least a portion of the grapevines, le'arise, to his sharecropper, to his tenant. And we'll talk about that in a moment. Amar lahu, so Rav Huna said to them, Mi kashavik li midi mine. He's not leaving me anything. Ha kagoniv lekule. He's stealing everything. So now let's just understand an aris, a sharecropper. The way it works is if you own a piece of land, you can make an arrangement, a sharecropping arrangement, where a person comes, they're going to work the field, they're going to give you as the owner of the field a percentage of the crop, and they're going to keep a percentage of the crop. And the Gemara talks about the standard arrangement, the standard percentages, and other arrangements that could be made. But the bottom line is that a sharecropper works the field, and he gets to keep a percentage, a portion of the crops that he brings in and harvests, and he gives a percent to the owner of the field. That's how it's supposed to work. So they said to Rav Huna, it's our understanding that your sharecropper, you're splitting the grapes. It was a vineyard that we're talking about. You're giving, the sharecropper is getting his percentage of the grapes, his correct percentage, and he's giving you your percentage. But when it comes to the vines, which you're also supposed to split, then you're not letting him get his share of the vines. So Rav Huna's answer to the Rabbanan was, that's true. I'm not giving him his percentage, because when it comes to the grapes, he's taking all the grapes. He's not giving me any grapes. A sharecropper could, of course, be deceitful about how big the crop was that was produced. He could come in and say, okay, the field produced 100 bushels of grapes, but it might have produced 300 bushels of grapes. So then he gives the sharecropper his portion of the 100, the alleged 100 bushels. Meanwhile, he gets to keep 200 bushels scot-free because he never told the owner of the field about the actual amount of grapes that were produced. So Rav Huna says he's stealing everything. So I had to protect myself somewhat. So I kept back the vines, the grapevines themselves. Amruleh, the Rabbanon said to Rav Huna, Hainu de Amre Inche. This is what people mean when they say, Basar Ganva Gonov. After a thief, if you steal from a thief who stole from you, Taima Ta'im, you're still tasting the taste of thievery. Ad Kan, until here is a quote from the Gemara in the first parak of Masechta Brachos. So what does that mean? Means the Rabbanan said to Rav Huna, that's not good enough. Your justification doesn't work. And according to halacha, they were saying to him, you should not be stealing from your tenant and holding anything back from him just because he stole things from you. A person like you, a person on your madrega, Talmud Chacham, has to be even more careful. And when a person does what you did, you're stealing back from a thief, you're keeping back something from someone who's stealing from you, it still gives you the taste of thievery. You're still doing something you might technically, it might be justifiable technically on legal grounds for regular people, or that might be an issue to talk about, but not for you. You shouldn't have done that, and that's why your wine went sour. So the Gemara goes on to relate, the Zera Shimshon doesn't quote it, but the Gemara goes on to relate that Rav Huna said to the Rabbanan, I understand that I did something wrong, and that's why my wine went sour. And from now on, I'll make sure to give him, no matter what he does, I'll make sure to give him the appropriate produce and vines and everything that he's supposed to receive. And then the Gemara says that the wine of Rav Huna was restored, and he was able to use it and sell it. But the point of the Gemara we're going to see from the Zera Shimshon coming up now in the next paragraph. Namtzinu limedim, so we find that we can learn from this Gemara, she'af lemisha gonev lanu, even someone who steals from us, ein anu yecholim lignov lo, we can't go steal from that person. That's the whole point of the Gemara in Brachos that we just learned about Rav Huna. The Rabbanan said to him, you suffered a huge financial loss because you stole from your sharecropper, even though he was stealing from you, it's not okay. Vuhu hadin b'ramoyim, and the same thing is true with deceitful people. Meaning that just because someone else is deceitful doesn't mean that we get to act with that it's permissible for us to act in a deceitful manner with that person. V'zo hayasa kushus Rachel, and that was the question that Rachel asked to Yaakov. Umi shari l'tzadikim l'seguye beramos, and who says it's permissible for a righteous man, Yaakov, like yourself, to practice deceit? Even with my father, who's a Russian, a deceitful person, it's still not okay. Just like we learned about thievery, about Geneva in the Gemara in Brachos. That's where Rachel was coming from. V'hahasam iskif le talid dani dechamra, a tough dani dechamra. And in that Gemara, Rav Huna lost 400 barrels of wine because he thought it was okay to steal from a thief. Yaakov Avinu, you're a tzaddik, and you're thinking it's okay to deceive and lie to my father. No, it's not true, as we see from the Gemara in Brachos. V'tirates Yaakov, and so Yaakov, now that we understand where Rachel was coming from with her question, now we understand what Yaakov meant when he answered. The hakroksiv, we need to understand the pasuk in Shmuel Beis, in ikesh titapal, with the corrupt Hashem, you deal craftily. Ubemai nukim kra. How can we understand? What can we establish that pasuk to be talking about? If the Gemara in Brachos is teaching us that even if a person steals from you, you can't steal back from them. And if we, by extension, that means that even if a person lies to you, you're not allowed to lie to them. So tzaddikim, in other words, have their hands tied completely. You can steal from them and they can't steal back. You can lie and trick them and deceive them and they can't do anything back. So what did the pasuk mean in Shmuel Beis, where it says Hashem himself acts craftily and trickily with those who are corrupt? Elavadai tzarich lomar, but you must say, Kepirish haritva, as the Ritva explains on that Gemara that we started off with in Baba Basra, Deshari lohen letzadike, that it is in fact permissible for tzadikim, L'me'evad tatzdike, the efshar lohula is the hure mirimausa. Tzaddikim are allowed to practice a kind of deceit if it is specifically going to be used to make it possible for them to protect themselves from someone who is trying to deceive them, to protect themselves from being deceived and taken advantage of. Miramusa diramoy. From the deception practiced by a liar and a deceiver. But to trick these same deceitful people in a totally different area, in a totally different matter, usher. That's forbidden. So what we see here is a kind of synthesis, a kind of putting together of the two different ideas that the Zera Shimshon has been developing. The first idea came from the pasuk in Shmuel Beis, which had to do with Hashem, David HaMelech saying Hashem himself acts purely and honestly, completely honestly and fairly with the pure and the just, but with the deceitful people, he himself acts craftily and even deceitfully in order to deal with corrupt, deceitful people. So that's one piece of the puzzle, so to speak, and that's what Yaakov Avinu was focusing on. Meanwhile, according to the Zera Shimshon, based on the Gemara in Brachos about Rav Huna and the wine, and this is what Rachel was basing her position on, we see that a tzaddik, like Rav Huna, the Rabbanan said to him, you are not allowed to steal, even though your sharecropper is stealing from you. And that is, in fact, the reason why your 400 barrels of wine went bad. So according to the Ritva that the Zera Shimshon is quoting, there's a way to synthesize that and put that together. And the answer is that when we're dealing with a deceitful person, even a tzaddik can act deceitfully, specifically and only dafka, if He is protecting himself if he's doing what he's doing in order to protect himself from the deceit of the liar and the corrupt person. However, anything outside of that, even though he is still dealing with a deceitful, corrupt person, usher, then that's forbidden and he can't do it. So that's the dialogue that was going on. So that means that what Yaakov said to Rachel was, I get it. And you're right. I'm not allowed to deceive your father in other areas in which he's not trying to deceive me. But in this specific area where you just explained to me that he's going to try and trick me into marrying Leah instead of you, I am allowed to protect myself from that because I focused on marrying you. And so therefore he gave her the simanim, he gave her the signs, which was a wonderful plan, but it didn't work out in practice as we've seen and as we know. So let's continue. Ve'im came kisha amar Yaakov l'Rachel, and if so, when Yaakov said to Rachel l'Ramos l'Lavan that she should participate in this deceit of Lavan, lo niskavein ela lehizaher, his only intention was to be careful, shelo yignov mimenu, that Lavan should not steal from him. Right? He's saying to Rachel, my only intention here is not just to trick your father because it's fun or because I'm allowed to because he's such a liar. No, he's trying to trick me and make it so I can't marry you. I'm going to give you simanim. I'm going to work with you on developing a plan so that we can deceive him in order to foil his deceitful plan about not letting me marry you. Ume'ata amar Yaakov l'Leah, and now that we understand that, so Yaakov says to Leah, Adra misah, you really are a deceiver. You really did something unacceptable. Sha'ani lo rimisi bach, I never deceived you. I never lied to you. Va'at ramis bi, and you lied to me. We're now moving to the top of the next page, Daf Shin Dalet. So Yaakov says, wait a minute, you didn't play the game by the rules. You deceived me, even though I wasn't trying to trick you and I did nothing to trick you. You still lied to me and you acted like you were Rachel. That's not okay. Amrale, so Leah said to Yaakov, Amrale, Leah said to him, Lo kach savach loch avuch Esav, didn't your father call out Esav, v'chule, and etc., and you answered that you were Esav? Klomar, this means to say. Now we're going to, Zera Shimshon's going to explain to us what Leah meant when she gave the answer that she gave. Klomar, this means to say, Mipnei mara mis avicha. Leah said to Yaakov, why did you think it was justified to deceive your father? Tzorech lomar, we must say, Shehoil shekfar kanisa habechora me'esav, you, since you had already purchased the birthright from your brother Esav, habrachos re'uyos lecha, then the brachos are appropriate to go to you. That must have been your reasoning. That was your reasoning. You had a legal purchase, a completely bona fide purchase of the birthright from Esav, and he sold it to you. And so you thought, yes, you deserve the brachos. Kemoshe Pirshu Zichron Levracha, as Chazal explained, al pasuk b'terem tavo va'avarchehu, on the pasuk inside the story of Yaakov coming in and then followed by Esav to get the bracha from Yitzchak, their father. So over there, the Zera Shimshon's referring to a piece in the Medrash Rabbah, which makes this point about Yaakov Avinu's thought process. Since he was, his justification was, I bought the birthright, and of course I should get the brachos. V'atar sisa arama, and you practice a trick. Kedelehi zoher, in order to be careful, shelo lahafsid habrachos, not to lose the blessings, shahayu ru'uyos lecha, that were appropriate and fitting to come to you. Mipnei she'ata bachor v'gadol, because you, after the transaction with Esav, were considered the firstborn and were considered the oldest. So what you did made sense. You did it because you were justified. So too, that's what I did, Leah says. You wanted to marry Rachel, neged minhag mikomenu, and that would have gone against the custom of our place, to give, which is never to give the youngest daughter, v'chule, etc., before the oldest daughter. And so therefore I was making every attempt, lihi zoher, to also be careful, milavo, to lose hatanos hara'uyos li, the claims, the rightful claims that were fitting for me. So the Zera Shimshon says that's really what was going on. It wasn't chas v'shalom that Leah was just giving a chutzpahdik answer to Yaakov and saying, why did I lie to you? Because you're a liar. You lied to your father and tricked him saying you were Esav, so I lied to you and said I was Rachel. Now everybody's even and let's have a nice marriage and live happily ever after. So the Zera Shimshon says, no, that's not what was going on. Everyone here in the story, Yaakov, Rachel, and Leah, were dealing with aspects of a sugya, of a halachic discussion that had to do with, is there any time, are there any circumstances when a tzaddik, when a righteous person is allowed to practice deceit and allowed to practice trickery? And they were focused on different aspects of that issue. And so here in the latest piece, Leah was saying to Yaakov, I understand why you deceived your father. It was because you had legitimate legal claims to the brachos. And that is what I was doing. I was protecting my legitimate legal claims, not to have my younger sister married off before me. Zera Shimshon continues, Umeata, and from now that we understand all of the ideas that the Zera Shimshon has developed for us, Tarumas b'nei Lavan, we can look at complaints that were made by the sons of Lavan, She'omru, that they said, Lokach Yaakov es kol asher la'avinu. Yaakov has taken everything, all of the sheep, all of the flocks that belong to our father. Ume asher le'avinu v'chule. And from what belonged to our father originally, he has now made himself a wealthy man. He's built up a tremendous amount of wealth, everything based on everything he took from our father. Hainu, this means shel Lavan ganav mimenu. What they were saying was Lavan stole from him. V'hu chazar v'ganav mi Lavan. And he went back and stole from Lavan. Lavan tricked him, he tricked Lavan. Lavan tried to steal from him, he made sure to get back property that he deserved from Lavan. V'zeh lo yitochen b'tzadikim. But Zera Shimshon says, but the sons of Lavan were upset and angry about it because they said, wait a minute, he's a tzaddik. Our father Lavan practices deceit and lying and cheating. That's okay. He's a Rasha. But Yaakov can't do these things. He's a tzaddik. It's not possible for him to act with Lavan the same way Lavan acts with him. Just like we saw by Rav Huna, where the Rabbanan said to him, just because your sharecropper is stealing from you doesn't mean you're allowed to steal from him. But even though the sons of Lavan thought they had a good claim against Yaakov, it's not true. Ki Yaakov lo gozel mi Lavan. Yaakov did not actually steal from Lavan. That means at no point did Yaakov, chas v'shalom, go sneak into Lavan's flocks and just steal sheep from him or steal any other items that belonged to Lavan and just stole them because he wanted to take things from Lavan just as Lavan was trying to cheat him. That's not what happened. Raksha nizhar mimenu. Everything Yaakov did was because he was trying to protect himself and be careful. Shelo ya'akev lo sechar pe'uloso. That Lavan should not withhold his rightful wages for his work. That's what was really going on. Yaakov Avinu had to protect himself because, as the Torah tells us, Lavan was constantly changing the arrangements and doing everything he possibly could to make sure that Yaakov did not receive his rightful payment and his rightful salary, so to speak, for the incredibly hard, devoted work that he was doing to take care of Lavan's flocks. The Moshe Nefarish Lekoman, as the Zera Shimshon says, as we will explain later on in Os Yud Ches, in section 18, a few sections later. V'zehu she'amru Rachel v'Leah. And we see this fact reflected in something that Rachel and Leah say later on. When Yaakov Avinu calls them to meet with him, and he says, it's time, I feel it's time that we should take everything we have, our children and our flocks and all our property, and we should leave. It's time to go back to Eretz. Yaakov says to go back to my family in Eretz Canaan. So Rachel and Leah say, "Hello, nochrios nechshavnu lo." Of course we agree. Our father has treated us like strangers. Our father hasn't treated us like daughters. He's treated us like strangers who don't deserve anything. Ki v'chule, ki kol ha'osher asher hitzil Elokim me'avinu, all of the wealth that God saved from our father, hayoroi lanu, that should have come to us. V'lo ba derech geneva rak derech hatzola. And it didn't come through Yaakov stealing it. It came through Yaakov saving himself and protecting himself and his family from the tricks and deceit and lies and corruption that Lavan was constantly practicing and attempting to practice against Yaakov. So we see from that conversation itself that Rachel and Leah understood the real situation as opposed to the Bnei Lavan. And now let's go to the last paragraph. V'zuhi kavonos hakosuk. And this is the intent of the pasuk from later in the Parsha, towards the end of the Parsha. When Lavan comes, Yaakov Avinu has taken his family and his wives and all of the flocks and everything, all of the property, and they have fled without telling Lavan. They've secretly fled, and Lavan catches up with them. And Lavan says, Ve'ata halo halachta, and now you have gone, you have surely gone. Okay, you left, you took off. V'chule, etc. Lama ganavta es Elohai. But why did you take my gods? Why did you take my idols? Which of course Yaakov didn't know about. That's something that Rachel did. Amar Lavan leYaakov. So what Lavan was really saying to Yaakov was, Bishlama im halachta. It makes sense. Like I can accept, I can understand that you left behechaveh secretly, shelo lahagid, and you didn't tell me ki yoresa, because you were afraid. Lavan says, I get it. You were afraid of me. Ki omarta, because you said to yourself, pen ani easeh eze mirma le'akvacha. Maybe I, Lavan, am going to come up with some stratagem, some trick to trick you and prevent you from leaving. I get that that's what you were worried about, right? So Lavan knew what kind of character he was and how Yaakov could legitimately be concerned about his tricks and his deceit. Va'ata his chachamta, and you were wise to do what you did. Keperish haritva shehevenu le'el, according to the whole explanation that the Ritva brought as to how tzaddikim are allowed to protect themselves when they're dealing with tricky, deceitful, corrupt people. And because I understand that that's what the pasuk in Shmuel Beis is talking about when it says "V'im ikesh titapal." With the corrupt, God will deal craftily. So Lavan gets everything. Lavan understands the whole sugya, and he says, "I totally get all of that." Yofe asisa. So it's good what you did. It makes perfect sense. Elabat lama ganavta. But why did you steal my idols? Because regarding my idols that have nothing at all to do with anything in any area that I'm trying to trick you and deceive you, you are not allowed to steal something from me. You can't take things from me. There's no open season on deceitful people. This is what Lavan is saying. There's no open season on deceitful people like myself, that because I trick people and steal from people and I'm corrupt, everyone can just come take my stuff. No, Yaakov, you're not allowed to do it. You want to take your family, you want to take your flocks, you want to take all your possessions and leave, and you don't want to tell me because I might trick you and prevent you from leaving. That I get. That's fine. That's totally permissible. However, you stole my idols, which have nothing to do with any dealings and any relationships between us. That's not okay. And on that point, Lavan was standing on firm ground. That would have been absolutely true and accurate. Of course, Yaakov Avinu did not steal the idols and did not know that Rachel had taken them. So that's the end of the piece. And once again, we can see how the Zera Shimshon takes a little small dialogue in the Chumash between Rachel and Leah and shows us, between Rachel and Yaakov Avinu, their first conversation. And he shows us that there's so much more going on there. And then the conversation, according to the Medrash, between Leah and Yaakov, and he shows us what's really going on there and how those two conversations are all connected and how all of this is part, as we said, of a sugya, of a halachic discussion about when is it permissible, if and when it's permissible, and under what circumstances for people who are trying to be as honest as they can and as good and yashar as they can to practice deceit when they need to do it or they think they need to do it to protect themselves from deceitful people. Yasher Koach, and thanks everyone for joining us tonight. And we look forward, God willing, to the Zera Shimshon, learning again Zera Shimshon next week.